Good. Good morning. Welcome to a new week. Today we're continuing with Maseches Yoma, Mishnah's Yoma, and today we're working on Perek Beis. Today's shiur is Li'ilei Nishmas Aaron Nachman ben Simcha Cohen, Yeshua Mordechai ben Shepsel, Brachas Sarah b'Shmuel Leib, Binyamin Moshe ben Yosef, Me'edin Hashem shall have an Aliyah. And for Shlema Ba'ad Sar Basleach, Hana Pesel Basyanta, Yisrael ben Rachalea, Yisrael ben Rachalea, Rachel bas Pesel Zelda, Abraham Yitzchak ben Risha, and Chaya bas Dobebela. Fua Shlema Basel Sharchal Yisrael. Good morning, Benny. And so Perek Beis is a continuation of Perek Aleph. We start, as a way of intro, we start off learning about the Trumas Hadeshin, which is where they took off some of the ashes from the night before, and that was the beginning of that day's avoda. So we ended off on Friday at what time, depending on the time of year, did they do the Trumas Hadeshin. On Yom Tov, they would do it already from the first watch at the end of the night, because there were so many people coming to the Beis Hamikdash during Yom Tov that they needed to get started earlier. Anyways, so the bulk of this parak is not going to doesn't really have any relevance to Yom Kippur. Rather, the bulk of the parak is talking about the different lotteries and different ways that they decided who's going to do what avoda, which obviously did not pertain to Yom Kippur, because all the avoda on Yom Kippur was done by the Kohen Gadol. So Perek Beis is not really pertaining to Yom Kippur, but it's part of the Masechta, and we're going to go forward with it. Because where else are you going to put it? I don't know a better place to put it than putting it to Yoma. Okay, here we go. Perek Beis, Mishnah Aleph. Perek Beis, Mishnah Aleph. Tech is all good. Okay. Berishona, Kol Mish Sherot Lisra Mizbeach Torah. At first, before this incident that we're going to talk about in the next Mishnah, any Kohen who wanted to do Trumas Hadeshin, to separate the ashes from the Mizbeach, separated it. It was, first come, first served. It was Manashahim Reuben, and when there were many Kohanim who wanted to perform this avodah, Ratzin v'Olim b'Keves, they ran up the ramp of the Mizbeach, which is 32 amos long. And whoever came before any of his fellow Kohanim into the final 4 amos of the ramp won the right to do Trumas Hadeshin. Okay, the first come first. Whoever won the race. But 2 of them were tied. It's a tie. Hamamuna Amalahem Hitzbiu. So the appointed official of the Beis Hamikdash said to all of them, "Put out your fingers." And the Kohanim would stand in a circle, and each put out a finger. The official announced a random number that was much higher than the number of Kohanim, such as 60 or 100. And then, starting with one Kohen, he went several times around the circle, counting the fingers. The Kohen with whom the count ended won the lottery. What number of fingers would the Kohanim put out? Achas or shtayim. 1 if the Kohen was healthy, or 2 fingers if you could not extend 1 finger without the finger next to it. So typically they put out 1, but if it was too hard to put out only 1, then they would put out 2. Okay, but regardless, those 2 fingers are counted as 1 finger, because there's an extension. However, the thumb was not allowed to be put out for the lottery at the Beis Hamikdash, because the Kohen could cheat by putting out a thumb and another finger and spreading them so far apart that they would be counted as 2. It look like this, right? So you might think this is 1 person, this is 2 people. This be counted as 1. but this could technically be counted the two, so they'd be cheating. You know, the fact that the Mishnah is describing this process to how to do the circle and to count, and which first the Mishnah was saying before that if two guys were tied, well, if two Kohanim tied the race, then you don't need to go such an extensive length like this. But it sounds like there are more than two people tied, especially like on a Yontif or whatever it was, and they had a lot of Kohanim that you had multiple Kohanim running up, and multiple people were tied for first. So maybe they would do this, but the concept that the Kohanim would cheat in order to do an avoda, that to me, I don't understand that. I don't understand. Here you're standing in the Mikdash. How are you possibly cheating in order to do an avoda? I don't understand that at all. Okay. Mishnah Beis. Maisa Shahaya Shneim Shavin Rutzim Olim Bekevis. It once happened that two Kohanim were tied as they were running up the ramp. V'dachaf echad mihen es chaveru, and one of them pushed the other. V'nafal v'nishbar raglo, who fell and broke his leg. Okay, that's not very nice, right? Especially on the mizbeach. The keva shirah base and shibana de sakana. Once the court saw that the Kohanim were put into danger by the race, his kina shelo yehu torment es mizbeach el b'payis. They decreed that one may not do too much tradition unless they had been selected by the lottery and the race was thereby abolished. Arba Paisus Hayusham. There were four lotteries were held then. Were held in the base of English on any given day. And this one, for the truth edition, was the first lottery of the four. So, okay, Mishnah Gimel. Hapayas Hasheni is, what was the second lottery? It determined who slaughtered the carbon tamid, Mizarek, who throws its blood against the sides of the Mizbeach, Mimadash and Mizbeach Panimi, and who clears the ashes of the previous day's Ketores from the Mizbeach Zahav, the inner Mizbeach, which is in the Kodesh, and who clears the ashes from the menorah, and who carries the limbs of the current Talmud up the ramp of the Mizbech and places them on the ramp. The limbs were divided into 6 sets, each carried by a different Kohen. The head and the back leg. And the 2 front legs, and the tail along with the hindquarters and the back leg. That was 3. The chest and the neck is 4. The fanos and the 2 sides of the animal. And the innards. Right, so that's already 6. The six Kohanim carried those sections as we just described. Soles, and this lottery also determined who carries the flour up the ramp. I mean, there was a korban mincha. If you follow along Daf Yomi, there's a korban mincha of flour that's brought together with the daily tabit. Chavitin, and also who carries up the chavitin. The Kohen Gadol does the minchas chavitin that was brought every day with the Talmud, and it sounds like he made it. For the Kohen Gadol made the chavitin, but any Kohen could bring it to the Mizbeach and burn it on his behalf. The Kohen Gadol didn't have to be the one to actually bring it up to the Mizbeach. He just had to make the chavitin. And who carries the wine? Because wine was poured onto the Mizbeach when the Korban Tamid is brought. In total, 13 Kohanim won the right to perform an avoda of the Korban Tamid through the second pious, the second lottery. Again, so you have slaughtering the Korban is 1, throwing his blood is 2, clearing out the inner altar, inner Mizbeach is 3, and the menorah is 4, and the numbers 5 through 10 were the different parts of the carbon itself, the different animal parts. Number 11 was carrying the mincha of the tabid. Number 12 was the chavita, and number 13 was the wine. That way, the 13 Kohanim were chosen by the lottery to do avoda. Okay, now we have Amar ben Azai the day Rabbi Akiva Bishur Rabbi Yeshua. Ben Azai said before Rabbi Akiva and then Rabbi Yeshua still on Mishnah Gimel, Derech Hiluchel Hayakarev, the order in which the tummy was brought corresponds to the way it walked when it was alive. First the head, together with the back right leg, then the chest and the neck, then the 2 front legs, then the 2 sides, and then the tail and the back leg. That was the order which the animal was brought onto this Mizbech according to Ben Azai. So interesting, the Tosas Yonta points out that Ben Azai does not mention the innards, since the innards cannot move on their own, but only together with the animal. He agrees that they are brought last. Okay, Mishnah Dalet. Hapayis. Today's Perek is only 7 Mishnayos, so we're halfway there. Hapayis Hashlishi, Mishnah Dalet. Hapayis Hashlishi. The third lottery was conducted as follows: Chadashim Lekatoras Bo Behafisu. The appointed official of the Beis Hamikdash announced those who are new to the avoda of Ketores come and participate in the lottery. This lottery was open only to Kohanim who had never offered the Ketores before in their lives, and not to those who had already done so. And as we discussed on Friday, like there were 24 mishmaros, and each mishmar had a base av, had 6 base avs. So a Kohen was only, and the 24 mishmaros, each mishmar had 1 week of the year, and it rotated 24. So they had 1 week in the first half of the year, and 1 week in the second half of the year, and it all came up for Yontif. So how many days of the year were the Kohanim actually working in the mishmar? It wasn't too often. So it was what am I saying here? Right. So they wanted to give the Kohanim who never had a chance to do Ketores yet to come and do it here. And Revi, the fourth lottery was conducted as follows: Chadashim im Yeshanim. The official announced those who are new can come together with those who are experienced. Since the previous lotteries, the third lottery was closed to those who had already performed the avoda. The official made it clear that this lottery is open to everybody. What was the lottery for? Mi male ivarim in hakeres v'lemizbeach. This lottery selected the Kohen who brings the limbs of the Talmud up from the ramp and tosses them onto the fire of the Mizbech. I guess you could ask, if it took 6 people to carry the limbs to the keves, to the ramp, why is it only taking 1 to carry it from the ramp up to the fire? I don't have an answer for that. Not yet. Right. Rashi says this in the Gemara. Okay, Mishnah Hey. Tamid Kari Betisha, the carbon tamid of the afternoon. Sorry, that's not right. The carbon tamid was sometimes offered by nine kohanim, but Sarah sometimes by 10, but Chalasar sometimes by 11, the Shnei Masar sometimes by 12. The Pachos La Yosef, there was never fewer than 9 kohanim and never more than 12. Mishnah explains how is it so. Asma Batisha, the Talmud itself was offered by 9 Kohanim. 6 carried the parts of the animal, 1 carried the chavita, and 1 the mincha, and 1 the wine. This is what we discussed before. That's the basic number of Kohanim required to offer the Talmud each morning. Okay, the Chag, but on Chag HaSukkos, Biyad echad sluchas shamayim. One additional Kohen had a flask of water in his hand, which he carried to the keves, to the ramp, which was later poured onto the mizbeach. It's called the Nisa Chamayim. Harei kana Sarah, and therefore we have 10 Kohanim. Ben Harbaya b'Achadasa. The afternoon tamid was offered on ordinary days by 11 Kohanim. Who Asma B'Tisha? The daily, the tamid itself was carried by 9 Kohanim, as we already explained. Ushnayim biyadam shnei gizei eitzim. Plus 2 Kohanim had 2 blocks of wood in their hands. Each Kohen carried 1 block to the altar, to the mizbeach, and put it on the pile of firewood in preparation for the afternoon tamid, the tamid shabein Rabbi. But Shabbos, Shabbos, the korban tamid of the morning was carried by 11 Kohanim. Who Asma B'Tisha? The tamid itself was 9, as we explained. Plus 2 Kohanim who had 2 ladles of lavona in their hands, one carried by each Kohen, which were burned on the mizbech. These came from the lechem hapanim. And on Shabbos that fell during Sukkot, besides for the Kohanim of the ordinary Shabbos morning, one had a flask of water in his hand, which was a requirement of Sukkot for the Nisa Chamayim. So the Shabbos during Sukkot, you had 12. Okay, awesome. Mishnah Vav. Ayel Kari B'Chadasar. Okay, now we're going to talk about the number of Kohanim needed to offer a korban olah. So Ayel Kari B'Chadasar. A ram was brought as a korban olah by 11 Kohanim. So how is that? The flesh, I mean, all the limbs except for the innards were carried by 5 Kohanim, just like the flesh of the tamid. But the innards, the flour, and the wine were each carried by 2 Kohanim, unlike the korban tamid, where each was carried by 1 Kohen. This is because the innards of a ram are bigger and heavier than those of a lamb, and the amounts of flour and wine brought with a ram are larger than those brought with a lamb. Sounds like a rhyme. Mr. Zion, par kare b'asba arba, a bull which is larger than a ram was brought as an olah, as a korban olah with 24 kohanim, because a bull is a big animal. Harosh v'haregel harosh v'haregel harosh b'echad haregel v'shnayim. The head and the back right leg were carried as follows: the head by 1 kohen and the leg by 2. That's already numbers 1, 2, and 3. Ha'oketz v'haregel. What about the tail and the back left leg? They were carried as follows: Ha'oketz b'shnayim, haregel b'shnayim. The tail by 2 kohanim and the leg by 2 kohanim. That's already 4 through 7. What about the chest and the neck? They were carried as follows: The chest by 1 kohen and the neck by 3. How big is a cow's neck? You need 3 people to carry it. The 2 front legs were carried by 2 kohanim. That's numbers 12 and 13. The 2 sides by 2 kohanim, which is 14 and 15. And the innards, flour, and wine were carried by 3 kohanim each, which is number 16 to 24. I mean, you got much more wine and much more flour. Those are much larger amounts than brought for a lamb or a ram. Therefore, they needed more people. In what case were these words stated? when were these numbers of Kohanim necessary? The Karbana Sibur, in the case of Korban Ola of a Sibur, of a Korban Yachid, but in the case of a private Korban Ola, in Ratzal Hakriv Makriv, if one Kohen wanted to bring the entire Korban by himself, he may bring so, meaning that the owner of a private Korban could choose a specific Kohen from the family of Kohanim that are on duty that day. Then that Kohen was allowed to perform all of the avoda, and no lottery was required. But if no Kohen was chosen, then the avoda of a private Kohen of a private korban was allocated to several Kohanim by lottery. Hapishtam benituchan shel elu shel. Their skinning and their carving is the same for both these nose, for both personal and tzibur karbanos, karban yachid, karban tzibur, and that they may be done by a non-kohen. Thank you for joining us. We'll continue tomorrow with Perek Gimel. Have a wonderful day.